Welcome to Local Heroes here on WKFK DTV7, where we interview veterans of the military and we bring you their stories, unedited and unchanged. So don't go away. We'll be right back with a very interesting story from one of our local veterans. Hello and welcome to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV7. Today we're coming to you from the inside of the battleship USS Alabama at Battleship Memorial Park in Mobile, Alabama, a place you really need to come see. Bring the family, bring the children, everything is great. You'll be glad you did. We're talking to Dr. Sid Phillips today. And Dr. Phillips, you got into the Marine Corps quite by accident, right after Pearl Harbor in World War II.
That's true.
What happened? Tell us what happened.
Well, we went down to join the Navy, a friend of mine and I, the day after Pearl Harbor, and the line was so long, it must have been literally 200 yards long. We went up to the head of the line just to see what was going on, and this Marine recruiting sergeant came over there and said, "Do you boys want to kill Japs?" And we said, "That's the idea, but we're going to join the Navy." And he said, "No, come on in here and let me talk to you." But to make a long story short, we joined the Marine Corps because the line was so long.
There was no line at the Marine Corps recruiting office. All right, you joined the Marines, so where did you go from there? Where did you go to your basic training when you went?
Went to Parris Island, South Carolina.
That's a tough place.
Yes, it is a tough place. If you survive that, you're really ready for anything from then on.
So were you regretting your decision after you went into the Marine Corps at all?
I imagine every recruit at Parris Island regrets his decision. I don't think there'd be an exception to that statement.
What was the part of your basic training in the Marine Corps that really stood out, that you still remember to today? What was the part that just really stuck with you?
Gosh, that's a tough question. I think the fact that you were made responsible for everything. Your own clothes, your own weapon, your own shoes. You understood that you took orders, that you were under authority. And they never let you forget it, never. 24 hours a day, you were obeying orders and under authority.
And the physical training was pretty tough too.
Oh, the physical training was brutal. It really was. It was actually at times brutal, but it was good. It was necessary, and I have no regrets of having gone through boot camp. I have no criticism of the system because the time was desperate and the country needed troops, and it was good. I never would criticize the Marine Corps for their discipline.
Now, where did you go after you finished your boot camp?
We went to, today it's called Camp Lejeune. It was brand new then. It was called New River. And there were nothing but tents and a few pasteboard buildings. But it became a gigantic base. But when I was there, it was brand new. Nothing paved, everything mud. When we arrived at New River, we were being put into the 1st Marine Regiment. They were trying to flesh it out. The 5th and the 7th were already there, but the 1st Marine Regiment was the young regiment, the new regiment, and we went through a lot of hard training there, probably for about, 3 months. I'd say we had 3 months of hard training. Then the division was ordered out. The 7th Regiment left first. They sent it to Samoa. Samoa was unprotected. Everything west of Midway was Japanese at that time, and they sent the 7th Regiment to Samoa and the 5th and the 1st Regiment to Wellington, New Zealand. Their plan was to bring the 7th Regiment down to Wellington, and the division would train for 6 more months, but that didn't happen. They had to go into Guadalcanal, and we went in with the 5th Regiment and the 1st Regiment, and then the 7th Regiment came later in October.
Now, when you were in your advanced training at Lejeune, New River, is that where you learned to be in a heavy weapons platoon or 81 millimeter mortar?
That's right. I was put in the 81 mortar. Well, they actually gave us a choice. You could go into machine guns or mortars, and I chose mortars because I always liked artillery, and mortars were 81 mortars were a terrible weapon. It really was. It's a lethal, terrible weapon, and it's heavy. I mean,
Yes.
You work hard the whole time you're in the mortar platoon, but
how many men were in your mortar platoon?
about 65.
And how many mortars were in the platoon?
4.
4 mortars.
4.
Now, describe for the people listening what these things weigh. They're not light, and you had to carry them.
They're broken down into 3 parts, and the bipod weighs 46.5 pounds, the tube weighs 44.5 pounds, and the base plate weighs 45 pounds. And you carry that thing everywhere you go. You're always with it. Mortar platoon is made up of 65 men and 4 squads, but mortar platoon in the Marine Corps is different because you have to have ammunition carriers. And when you go into a landing, there are men that do nothing but carry ammunition. Machine gun squads the same way, they're ammunition carriers. So a squad in a mortar platoon is a very, very large squad, but after you come ashore, the other members of the squad are always procuring ammunition, going and getting ammunition, whatever needs to be done. So mortar platoon is a little different from a rifle company.
What would a single 81 millimeter mortar round weigh?
Well, they had HE light, HE medium, HE heavy, and heavy shell weighed 15.5 pounds, and the light shell weighed 5.5 pounds.
But you could put out those 15-pound shells rather quickly, could you not?
Yes, you could. Once you fire the mortar the first time, it pushes the base plate into the ground, and after you fire it about 4 times, the base plate becomes settled, and then you can fire rapidly. You cannot fire rapidly until the base plate becomes settled, but then you can fire as fast as you can throw them in there. But that's really not ever good practice. They didn't teach us to do that. There was more stress put on accuracy. And we were good. We knew what we were doing, and we could hit our target. But the general concept is that in war you're fighting all the time, and that's just not true. A lot of times you're bored to death, and you seldom see that in movies or documentaries or anything that Hollywood puts out. Hollywood makes the public think that everybody's fighting all the time, but that just isn't true. Nobody would be alive after a few days if that were true.
It's long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror.
Exactly.
That's what it is. Now, you went ashore at Guadalcanal, first day, second wave. The Japanese really weren't expecting us to invade that day, were they?
Correct.
There was virtually no...
They were building an airfield.
Right. But there was hardly any resistance when you first went in.
None. We really, in my area, there was no resistance at all. And we landed down the beach from the airfield. We didn't go directly into the airfield area.
Your objective was a real high bluff or a ridge somewhere?
something they called Grassy Knoll, which turned out to be a mountain. It was supposed to be close to the beach and not very high. But,
Yeah. Knoll doesn't bring the picture of a mountain to mind, does it? Did you make it up that mountain the first
no,
day?
we didn't, but we got part way up, and they called it off the second day. They said, forget it, we're going back to the beach.
When did the resistance from the Japanese start?
Well, it started immediately in the form of naval activity and air activity, and continued the whole time we were there. They were always either bombing us or bombarding us, and particularly landing troops at night. The Japanese were night fighters. We controlled the air later on in the campaign during the daytime, but they came at night. The Japs always seemed to hit us at night.
Yeah, the big Japanese battleship was coming down the slot, bombard Guadalcanal, and the destroyers would unload the troops and they would come ashore.
Correct.
They did not want us to get that island.
It was an unsinkable aircraft carrier.
It was an unsinkable aircraft carrier.
What it was.
Now, the airfield there you captured basically on the first day.
Based on the first day?
Basically, you captured the airfield on the first day.
Yes, correct.
And it was later become known as Henderson Field.
Correct.
Cactus Air Force Marines were flying out of there.
We never heard the name Cactus when I was there.
You didn't hear that?
That I remember. But,
oh, okay.
But yes, it became known as Cactus Air Force, Cactus Airfield. But we privates didn't know anything about that.
Well, Mr. Phillips is going to have to take a short break right here, but we're going to come back and talk more about your Marine Corps experience in World War II. So don't go away. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Local Heroes here on WKFK TV7. We're coming to you from the battleship Alabama. Before we were up on the deck, now we're down in one of the beautiful rooms on the ship, but we're talking to Dr. Sid Phillips, Marine Corps veteran from World War II. Dr. Phillips was on Guadalcanal. Dr. Phillips, like you said earlier in our first segment, it's not all war and fighting. I want to get a sense from you exactly some of the things that were going on Guadalcanal, like work parties and what you had to eat and the ammunition supply and the food supply. Just give our viewers a sense of what was going on as far as, let's talk about the food supply.
Guadalcanal has been frequently referred to as the shoestring operation in the sense that there just wasn't enough of anything. And when we went into the island, our Navy had to pull out, and our transport ships had to pull out. They were only partially unloaded. So the whole campaign was conducted with a shortage of everything. We had the rations we had brought in and part of what we had unloaded, but they had only brought 10 days rations. So we would have starved to death if the Japanese had not had a large supply of rice there. We ate this Japanese rice twice a day for weeks, and your name was checked when you went through the chow line. Excuse me, you couldn't go through it twice or three times. You went through the chow line once and got your 2 tablespoons full of rice, and it was wormy. I don't know what they were, but they had legs and were about the size of a grain of rice, and after a while nobody even separated them. They just ate that too. But food was a big problem on Guadalcanal. The whole time we were there, we didn't begin to get food in there, in my recollection, in any quantity until December.
So you were just eating mainly the captured Japanese rice?
And what could be brought in. They would bring in corned beef. They would bring in sea rations. They would bring in, well, any kind of hard rations. But we were under the Navy. The Navy had sea rations only. And the Army had K rations, which we were able to get later during the war. But the Navy never had anything but sea rations. and I think a dog food company made them. There were three rations. There was meat and beans, meat and vegetable stew, and meat and vegetable hash. And after a while, you didn't care which one you had. They all tasted so bad. And you threw your knife and fork away. You just carried a spoon in your pocket all the time. You tried to eat C rations late in the afternoon so you didn't have to fight the flies. The flies would disappear at dark. And quite often the guys would wait and eat after dark. But Guadalcanal was a dirty campaign. It was, we had no mosquito netting. The mosquitoes would just nearly carry you off. Dysentery was constant with everyone. We had no toilet paper. I just remember Guadalcanal as a hard work, shortage of everything, and telling lies. I mean, I think we lived by telling lies and comedy. Comedy went on 24 hours a day, nothing but foolishness and jokes. And I kind of marvel at that now because the comedy never ceased. It never ended. People were pulling pranks on one another, pulling tricks. I remember our communicators one time, this boy would wind the field telephone and he could pick it up, and he was an expert at double talk. He could talk into that telephone and it would almost sound like he was saying something, but it was gibberish. And then he would hang up and the phone would ring and he'd pick it up. He'd say, "No, sir, nobody's called from here. Our phone's been dead." But that sort of thing went on 24 hours a day, just pranks, always pulling pranks on one another.
Something to break the monotony of the boredom and also to keep your sanity, basically.
Correct. And everyone was a clown.
Now, did you have to go back to the beach because all the supplies were coming in over the beach?
Correct. No harbor at Guadalcanal. All supplies had to be unloaded from ships into landing craft, and the landing craft brought to the beach and unloaded again at the beach. Sometimes, if you were lucky, you could go out on the landing craft and work on the ships, but that was very seldom. Usually we unloaded at the beach.
Did you get good food when you were on the ship?
Yes, if you could get aboard ship, you could get some decent food, and that's why everybody would volunteer to go aboard ship on a working party. But the biggest problem with the food was just shortage. There just wasn't any. It seemed like, and 2 or 3 times we were really close to starving to death, but we didn't. We got through it.
Now, your ammunition supply, did you have to go back to the beach and actually pick it up yourself?
Ammunition supply was delivered to your gun positions. We had ammunition pits by each gun, and sometimes we get as many as 50 rounds ahead, and we were very happy when we had 50 rounds ahead, but the ammunition would be brought by trucks to the gun positions.
But you got sent back to the beach to work the work?
Every day or every other day. Working parties were endless. Aviation gasoline was brought in primarily on destroyers, on decks. The destroyer would come up close to the beach, they'd roll it off, and then he'd race up and down the beach, making a big wake to wash it ashore. And then we had to pick the drums up, and it takes 5 men to pick up a drum and load them into trucks where they'd be taken to the airfield. And it was hard work.
You were telling me earlier that your sergeant knew 2 names, yours and somebody else's.
Sullivan and Phillips were the only 2 names my sergeant knew. We went on every working party we claimed, and I think it was true.
So you're basically living in a really bad situation. You don't have much food. You're in a work party about every other day. That must have been an extremely difficult thing for you guys to endure.
Well, it was bad, but the thing was, we didn't know any better. We had not been in World War I. We did not know what a campaign was supposed to be. we were green troops, and we thought this is just the way it was. And it was only later that we found out how bad it really had been. But at the time, we did not feel that we were being put upon or deprived. We just had our duty to do, and in the Marine Corps, you do it. There's just no discussion. You do what you're told to do.
So you had communication with field phones, and somebody would call in a fire mission in support of a ground operation.
Right. We had field telephone units there. They called them communicators, and one of the communicators was he was a comedian if there ever was one. He would, for instance, he would crank the telephone, and he would get an answer on the other end, and he would pretend to be somebody else. This is Sergeant Blair, and then he would talk in this double talk that was just gibberish, and hang up, and in a few minutes the phone would ring, and he'd pick it up, and he'd say, "No, Major, no one has used the phone here. No one has called at all." And he would hang it up, and we'd say, "You're going to get in trouble." He'd say, "How?" I said, "There's no brig. What are they going to do?"
What are they going to do? Take me off of Guadalcanal? Which might have been what he wanted.
One boy in our squad kept saying that he wouldn't even be there if he'd brought his Jesus shoes, that he just forgot to bring them. But the comedy never ended. It really didn't.
Now, obviously the supply of everything is short. I assume uniforms, boots, and everything else is in short supply.
Clothing, yeah.
I've read stories and heard about people in Guadalcanal basically operating in rags or torn up uniforms.
Just about true. That's just about true, yeah.
So you didn't even get any replacement for that?
No, we never got any clothing issue. But the CBs, we had a CB unit there, and they would give us clothes. You'd see a lot of Marines wearing a blue shirt or something like that. We loved the CBs. CBs had 3 meals a day. We had 2. And we'd go over and hang around the CB's chow hall at noon, and sometimes get invited to eat the leftovers. And we always had a helmet. You could get the food in your helmet, and you carried a spoon. We were like a bunch of homeless, groveling.
So you take off your steel pot, it was called.
Right.
You'd pull the liner out of it and go through the line and have them put it in the steel pot.
Correct.
And then you'd eat out of your steel pot.
Absolutely. I mean, there wasn't any shortage of, there wasn't any missing out on meals because you didn't have any mess gear with you,
You always had your helmet.
Always had your helmet.
Multi-use item there.
Wonderful, wonderful item. I worry about the new troops with their fine-looking helmets. I don't know if they can use them to wash in and all.
They protect your head, but they're not really a utility device.
We loved our helmets.
So when a fire mission's called into your mortar platoon and you start firing the mortar, is there a way that you had a forward observer who was directing the fire, who was telling you up 25, left 50?
Yeah, absolutely. That was always, just like an artillery unit, a mortar battery works the same way.
And what was your job during a fire mission? I know you carried the bipod, but what was?
I was number 1 man, and number 1 man is the gunner, and number 1 man is responsible for leveling one of the bubbles and putting the deflection and numbers on the site. You have elevation. Well, like they'll call in range 2,000, and that might be 6840 charge 2 on the HE light shell, and that's the gunner's job. He goes to the range card. We carried range cards in our helmet all the time, and so every new order has to be translated into practical information.
So the mortar round's primed, and then around the base of the mortar round, there are little charges that are added according to the distance the round's
Those are called increments. And they're powder and celluloid, and they're very hazardous. I mean, they demonstrated the hazard of an increment. You can throw 1 increment into a fire, and it'll make a flash as big as an automobile. So you don't want extra increments laying around on the ground. HE heavy shell comes with 4 increments. And I remember one time we were firing with no increments. So you were gaining 4 increments off of each shell. And there was one man running around picking them up off the ground, putting them in a canister and throwing them in the ocean. Because if you have the ground covered with increments and one of them goes off, it'll set them all off and you'd kill everybody.
You could disappear in a cloud of
You
smoke.
could disappear in a cloud of smoke. So increments are very important in mortar firing. And you have your range card. Your range card tells you how many increments, what elevation and whatnot to get to a certain distance. Mortar firing is you know, if you take a garden hose, go out in the yard and try it. And if you will just notice, you have a maximum distance that the water will go. If you raise it up a little bit, it won't go as far. If you raise it lower than that, it won't go as far. 45 degrees is maximum range with garden hose under pressure or with artillery or mortar fire. And so mortar never fires below 45. It's always 45 and above. So you learn these things. It becomes part of your whole knowledge. And we knew what we were doing. We were good with that mortar. We could hit something with it.
Dr. Phillips, we're out of time for this show. We're going to bring you back for another one. Don't forget, join us next week for more of this interesting story with Dr. Sid Phillips, United States Marine Corps, World War II. Don't miss it. Thank you for watching this edition of Local Heroes here on WKFK DTV7. Go to our website at WKFK.com and click on the links and follow those links to archive stories about veterans. And join us again next week at this same time for another Local Heroes here on WKFK DTV7.